I flew to a small island in the middle of the Atlantic chasing one thing, a fish powerful enough to empty my reel and put every skill I have to the test. But nothing could have prepared me for the encounters I would have on this trip. The fish are not the only ones that call this island home. On the next few days I will encounter some shit straight out of a documentary, and straight from another planet. Not to mention I'll be diving some of the most insane structure I've ever seen in my life. If you're wondering where I'm at, welcome to Madeira. Formed from hundreds of thousands of years of volcanic eruptions, this island is essentially the summit of a mountain that spans from the seafloor all the way up to an elevation of almost 6,000 feet. But I didn't come here to hike, I came here to hunt. And my goal for this trip is to shoot my first real pelagic. I'm talking something with teeth and a body count. Something that can pull me down and kill me if I'm not careful. And I'll be doing all this on a reel, with no breakaway and no float system. And so we arrive at the first spot, on the northeastern side of the island, where the current is absolutely ripping. And having not dove in almost 2 months, I'm itching to get in there. The plan is to warm up in the shallows before heading to the blue water. And on my very first drop, I spot a hogfish. But sadly he holes up and he tears off. And so I wave goodbye and head to the surface to breathe before trying again. In Madeira, there are two types of grouper that you'll commonly encounter. The dusky grouper and the island grouper. Both look very similar, but the dusky here is protected, so you have to be very careful with which grouper that you shoot. And on this drop, I spot an island grouper. But I rush the shot, and I miss the fish. And as I'm coming to the surface, I realize I need to slow the hell down. As told by my captain, one doesn't simply shoot fish in Madeira, you must hunt them. And in order to hunt a fish, you have to become part of their environment. So I slow way down on this drop, and watch what happens. I'm using this rock as cover, and slowly the fish are getting a lot more comfortable near me. And so I crawl over to where I missed that grouper, and I was on the bottom for what felt like forever. I turn to my right, and there's a massive hogfish. And I nail him. It makes a run for the structure, but I pinch the line with my left hand as I ascend, keeping him out of that hole. And before I know it, I surface, and I'm playing tug of war with the hogfish already. This trip is starting out good. The fish slowly gets exhausted, so I dive down to meet it in the middle of the water column, instead of pulling it all the way to the surface and risking a tear-off. And with the fish secured in my hands, I'm mesmerized by how gorgeous this thing is. The colors on it are insane. And so behold, the first fish of the trip. And at 5 kilos, this is actually a pretty big hogfish. And let me tell you, this thing is delicious. Some butter, garlic, and paprika, and oh my god, what a lunch. And so back to the water I go. I've never dove here before, so I'm super interested to see what's hanging around these cracks and crevices. So I slowly crawl around the bottom, peeking underneath the rocks to see if I can find anything interesting to shoot. And as I peek inside this one, I find myself being stared down by another island grouper. And this time, I don't miss. One way you can tell this fish apart from a dusky is its body shape is much more streamlined and long. A dusky looks a lot more like an American football. The island grouper also has a streak underneath its eye, which is a distinct feature. So I put it out of its misery and swim it back to the boat. And right after I dropped off that grouper, I notice I'm being followed by 2 small jacks. So I don't waste any time. I put a really nice shot through the gills, and with the amount of blood you'd think this thing's out of energy, but it's going cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. It was pretty tricky to get my hands on this fish. It even headbutts me right in the mask. And just because he does that, I decide I'm turning this fucker to sushi. So eventually I get my hands on the fish, put him out of its misery, and as you can see, it's not the biggest, but you know what they say, the little ones taste the best. Especially raw. And I'm no sushi chef, so don't make fun of my cuts. And so before we head to the blue water, I decide I'll make a couple more dives, and as I'm looking underneath this ledge to my left, I notice something freaky, something I've never seen in my life. It's a cuttlefish. I've always wanted to try fresh cuttlefish, and I've never shot one. I've always said if aliens exist, they're not in space, they're in our oceans, and this is no exception. And the amount of ink that came out of this cuttlefish was very impressive. Watching this thing squirt ink was mesmerizing. It was like art, like it was dancing. But as they say, all good things must come to an end. And as I put this guy to an end, half of his body changed colors as I'd knife each part of the mantle. And honestly, it was a bit sad, as it held onto the knife in hopes to survive. But eventually I cut the lights out and the entire cuttlefish turned white, before getting sauteed and turned into an appetizer. And with the shallows conquered, it was time to do what I came here for. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I didn't come here to shoot reef fish. I wanted to shoot something big with a body count. And so I loaded up my brand new carbon inverted roller, all 3 bands on that motherfucker, and I hit the blue water. And if you've ever done blue water spearfishing, you know what I mean when I say this is the most boring thing ever. For hours, I floated around soaking in piss-filled wetsuit, playing with a flasher. The whole time, I'm just hoping something would appear from the abyss. As the blue played tricks on my mind, eventually something did show interest in the flasher, however. But it was far from what I was after. This thing definitely does not have a body count. I don't know its name in English, but it's similar to a blue runner, and it also makes really good sashimi. But sometimes the blue isn't completely empty. I have no idea what this is, and if someone can please tell me, I would really appreciate that, but it was the size of a small apartment building. It spanned from a seafloor of almost 70 meters, so this thing was huge. Now, I don't have thalassophobia, but if I did, this is probably what my nightmares would be made out of. So I unloaded one of the bands on my gun, and I went straight down to check it out, but sadly there was nothing cool in there. So I took a seat and just admired the view, before we head to the last and final spot. This was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's an underwater mountain that comes up from a seafloor of about 50 meters deep, with a peak just 5 meters below the surface. And I made the mistake of taking my reef gun. Just as I load up, I look underneath me and there's a fat barracuda. And for context, my good friend in Egypt just got attacked while scuba diving by a cuda, and I promised him I would avenge him. So this is very personal. But I'm severely undergunned, and this cuda is just out of range, but I take a Hail Mary anyways. And before swapping to my big gun, I choose to make one more dive and check out what's hanging around this mountain. Like I said, I've never seen anything like this. The views were so good, I forgot I was even hunting. But I took a seat, scratched on the rock, and made some fish calls to see if I could call something in. But the day was not getting any longer, so I didn't want to waste time. For the next hour and a half, it was pretty uneventful. There were tons of bait, but no pelagics. That was, however, until I made this drop. I dropped down to over 20 meters, fully loaded up, and I'm scouring the slopes. There's a really big grouper. It's a little bit out of camera range, but it was there, trust me. But something felt off. It was eerie and quiet, almost as if something was gonna happen. And if that jump scared you, it jump scared me too, but I had no time to waste. I singled out a good Barracuda, and I took my shot. So at this point, I think I upped the score on the Cuda. It made a run to the bottom. As I surface, I'm hoping it doesn't go for the structure.
Barracuda!
But as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. The fish tore off, and it tore a piece of my heart with it.
No!
And with the weather getting worse and worse, we had about 20 minutes before we would have to head back to the marina, and I did not want to leave in defeat. Especially not after that Cuda bit my friend. Thankfully, the Cuda stuck around, and I found this Lone Ranger. Took my shot, and it tore off also. And at this point, I'm getting pretty frustrated. But the bait ball came back. I've never reloaded a spear gun this fast in my life, because I knew if the Cudas appeared, this would be my last chance at landing one. And just underneath the bait fish were about 25 Barracuda. The biggest one of the school came in range. And I hit it with a force this poor Barracuda could not possibly comprehend. But this was the easy part, as hard as I made it seem. Now the hard part was landing the fish. I couldn't see how good of a shot that was. It was honestly pretty rushed. It could have been only hanging by a thread, and I would have no idea. Just a little too much tension on the line would mean the difference between a very quiet car ride home and windows down, music blasting Barracuda in my stomach. It only lasted a few minutes, but this fight felt like an eternity. And thankfully the Cuda wore out pretty quickly. I could feel it becoming more and more lethargic, and the real tricky part was coming right up. The moment of truth is right around the corner. But I stayed calm and put as little tension on this fish as possible. At this point, it's still Barracuda 3, Yusuf 0, and I just cannot accept those odds. If this thing tears off, that would be it. We'd have to head back to the marina, and I would be Cuda-less, and I cannot just let that happen. If you saw my last video in Egypt, you know I lost a Cuda right in my hands, and that's all I could think about. Now I'll stop rambling and I'll let you feel the intensity of this moment. At last, I upped the score. It was now Barracuda 3, Yusuf 1. The Cuda was mine, and I could not have been more happy. And as I put a knife into its brain to put it out of its misery, bled it out, it made one last thrash before it completely succumbed to its wounds. And I noticed this thing was hanging by a thread. It's no monster, but it has teeth, and it has a body count for sure. And I was not exaggerating when I said it was hanging on by a thread. I've definitely shot bigger fish, but this is no doubt one of the most rewarding fish I've ever landed. And you are out of your mind if you say Barracuda tastes bad. This was probably the best pan-fried fish I've ever had. Although I didn't land a monster this trip, Madeira definitely taught me to slow the hell down and hunt rather than just try to shoot the fish. And if you've made it this far in the video, just go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.